You'll know when you have a wild woman. She'll practice her craft without boundaries. She is truly autonomous.
Her loyalty is only to the family she serves, a midwife who will not allow herself to be held back by a system she didn't create.
This podcast is for the birth keepers who want to grow and change. We are open to learning through self-reflection and supportive community. We are creating this space to explore without judgment. We are remembering we were
born wild. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Born Wild podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sophia, and today I have with me Linda Fitzgerald, and I'll hand it right over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Sophia. So my name is Linda, and I'm actually originally from Europe, and I've been living in the United States for 6 years, and half of the journey was being a mother for me. So for the last 3 years, I've been studying infancy biology and how neuroscience impacts what we know from neuroscience and parenting and how we can do our best as parents. So I became an infant sleep educator very shortly after my son was born in 2022 because I was just bombed by so many conflicted advice, and I didn't know what to think. And I actually followed some of the advice, and it didn't resonate with my instincts. So I really wanted to know what the science has to say about sleep. And then I wanted to dive even deeper. So I studied neuroscience or developmental neuroscience with two amazing neuroscientists, Greer Kirschenbaum and Rocio Zonini. And we dove into hundreds of studies on how nurturing parenting impacts future mental health and physical health for our children.
Well, this is going to be a really important topic because everyone likes sleep. And
Yes.
Not a lot of people are getting it when they have babies. So I'm curious where your journey began. Like, you were in Europe. At what point did you come here? Did you have your babies over there? What is that like? If so, like, where did your journey into being passionate about sleep, where did that start?
Yeah, I actually moved here because I fell in love with my husband. We met at Burning Man, and it just happened. And I moved from Europe to the United States, and it was right before COVID. And I didn't really know at that time. I just graduated at college, and I didn't really know what I'm gonna do. I could not really work because of all the visa issues, and it was COVID. It was really hard to find community. It was a struggle for me to live here those first 2 years. But then when I got pregnant, everything changed. Especially here in Marin, where we live in Fairfax. I feel like when you're pregnant or when you have a child, it's an instant connection with everyone. The community just builds itself. So, but the journey started basically with the birth of my son, because most of the parents are alone on this journey, and we don't have any guidance. Our only guidance might come from pediatrician, and so at the beginning we don't even know what resonates with us, what philosophy we want to take, what parenting journey we want to go on. So I was so confused in the beginning, and I feel like a lot of parents are, especially first-time parents, right? So I really want to know what the science has to say, because I was getting so much advice that didn't sound right. My instincts were telling me, you cannot do this, to your child, like letting him cry or not to pick him up too much, or basically don't be nurturing. Those were the messages I was getting from the society or from other parents. But anyways, yeah, I was very alone on this journey, and without any guidance, I just decided to book for any resources. And what made me become an infant sleep educator was coaching, one coaching session I had with a sleep consultant from India. She actually lives in Singapore now, but I learned that Indians are actually really nurturing. Most of them bed share, they, breastfeed, they don't know sleep training. So she actually just confirmed what I already knew. She said it's okay. She gave me permission to trust myself. And instead of a 30-minute coaching call, we had 2 hours coaching call. And I was in a flow, And then she recommended amazing resources, books, and also a coaching program that I took, holistic sleep coaching program designed by Lindsay Hookway, who's a really famous sleep educator. So from there, I started to study. I took every opportunity to study. Like when my son was napping, when I had help, I was just obsessed with infant sleep, and I wanted to know everything. With the goal of being able to advise other people on that topic. And of course, the journey shouldn't end there for every professional. You should always build on new knowledge. So I want to know what neuroscience has to tell us about parenting and sleep and so many different topics. So that's why I joined a program designed by Greer Kirschenbaum and Rossi Ozunini.
Can you touch a little bit on like the safety of bed sharing and co-sleeping and things like that? Because I think a lot of, if anything's going to stop somebody from doing it, a lot of the times it has to be about the safety of it and how to do it safely.
Yep. I think if you're considering bed sharing as a parent, La Leche League has an incredible resource. It's called Seven Safe Sleep. Oh, I'm not sure now. I will share the resource with you.
Sounds good.
But if you follow all of those steps, which means basically your child should sleep at the breast level, you shouldn't have any covers in the bed, so there is not a danger of suffocation for the child. You shouldn't sleep on a safe sleep surface when you consume alcohol, or you shouldn't sleep with pets. Also, it's recommended that a mother sleeps next to the child, not the child shouldn't sleep between mother and father. It should be on the side next to mother. It's called Safe Sleep 7. Sorry, I just forgot. But yeah, there are many resources, but this one would be the first one I would recommend to first-time mother. And I actually would recommend it to every parent, because most of the parents everywhere, and not just United States, everywhere, they go sleep at some point. And if it's done safely and you follow those guidelines, there is basically the concern is sudden infant death syndrome. So if you follow all of those guidelines, there is not a bigger danger than having a child sleep in a crib or on a separate surface. Yeah.
And because it's safer than getting to the point where you're so exhausted you can't put the baby back in the crib, and so then you decide to, and you're not set up for it.
Yeah, many parents, sleep with their children in a recliner or on a sofa, that is not set up for a safe sleep. Or sitting with the child, which when the child slips down the legs and can fall. And so I think every parent, pregnant parent already, should prepare for that journey, because even if they plan on having a child sleep in the crib, they should be prepared that there might be rough nights when they will not need to have the child in the bed, or the parent might just fall asleep, because breastfeeding mechanism basically makes us sleepy, as mothers. The baby falls asleep and mother is meant to fall asleep too. There are hormones that make us sleepy.
Yeah. Can you speak a little bit to the neuroscience that you were speaking of?
Yeah. So I'm actually going to start a Nurture Neuroscience Circle in Fairfax. That's basically going to be a gathering for moms with pre-crawling babies. And I'm going to share a lot of insights from neuroscience. But basically what neuroscience is telling us is that we have so much research now that's sharing that being nurturing parent is the best outcome for our children in terms of their mental health and physical health. So we know that mental health is in decline. Every fifth child in the United States is diagnosed with a mental health disorder. That's extremely alarming. And we can think, okay, it's overdiagnosed. But I think we shouldn't ignore these numbers, and we should look at what science has to tell us, what we can do as parents to prevent this. And we have had over 30 years of research from neuroscience, and we, of course, have had for over 60 years, we've had attachment theory and so much research based on that. And we know that being nurturing is like the best medicine, the best booster for mental health and physical health. It's related. So I think I should explain what nurturing means, actually, what nurture means. So neuroscientists define it in these 3 points. So the first one is you should have parental sensitivity. So that means when your child is crying, you pick up the child fast. So you respond quickly, reliably, and with affection. Then you should be emotionally attuned to your child. So basically the child feels felt, the child feels seen, accepted with all the feelings and emotions. And then the last pillar of the nurture is actually co-regulation. So children are not able to regulate their emotions. That is managed by a very complex system, prefrontal cortex. I will touch base on it in a minute. But what basically our children need, and not just for the first 3 years of life, but for a long time, is that we lend them our mature adult brain, our mature nervous system, and we help them regulate their emotions because they are not able to do that. If we don't do it, the children are actually going to be first in fight and flight, then they're going to be in freeze, and then they're going to be in dissociated state. And that is going to be very stressful, and it can be very chronic, and it can be traumatizing for children if it's, let's say, crying for prolonged periods of time or not being responded properly. But I mentioned that the children don't have prefrontal cortex. So there are 3 stages of brain development. The first one is we have survival brain. That brain already grows in the womb and develops all the way until the age of 1. Survival brain is responsible for keeping the babies in a relationship, which is really important for thriving. There actually have been reports of babies that were not in a relationship, they were ignored, and they died. And another function of the brain is basically, physical functions like breathing, heartbeat, digestion. So that's survival brain. And then we have emotional brain. And that's the foundation of mental health. And that grows from 0 to 3. And that's where the systems for stress, emotions, relationships, and other systems grow and they are built. And that's the foundation of mental health. And basically the prefrontal cortex that grows from 3 until around mid-20s, there are very, very, very complex functions like self-regulation, self-soothing. We hear about self-soothing all the time, but babies are not capable of that. It's such a myth, They might not be capable of that at 3. They might be more capable of that at the age of 10 and later on. Then there is complex thinking, future planning. Like you don't meet a toddler. You don't see a toddler that is thinking about, okay, what are we going to do in a week? Everything is now, So there's very complex functions in the prefrontal cortex of thinking brain that just children don't have. And once you have this understanding, and there's so much more to talk about, but once you have a deep understanding of this, you will understand other parenting topics. You will understand sleep. You will know what you can expect from your child and from yourself too.
Yeah, what they're capable of. I think that's another piece is in terms of nurturing is a lot of people grew up with the you know, oh, you're okay, get up, kind of like you don't want to create sissies or, you know, kids who can't self-soothe, things like that. We think that if we don't, that in ignoring and letting them cry, we are teaching them how to self-soothe. And what I'm hearing from you is you're actually teaching them to disassociate and understand that they're on their own.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's going to have an impact on attachment, and it's going to have an impact on, you know, the emotional system. We have research that proves that. We see it on a physical level. We see it in the questionnaires that were responding a few days later. Oh, sorry, a few years later. I can actually share some research now with you. So there was a study that studied maternal affection and if it predicts adult mental health. And the study was started in 1977, and it was done for over 34 years, so a long time. And what they basically were testing was how the affection or the nurture affects the mental health, how it affects the physical health. So they were just looking at the low, normal, or high levels of affection. And we already mentioned that that's the parental sensitivity, emotional attunement, and co-regulation. So was it low, normal, or high? Okay. And there was a really big sample of people participating. And what they found 34 years later, so they measured at 8 months, and 34 years later, they actually visited these people again, and they asked them, how is your mental health? How is your physical health? You know, how are your relationships? And they learned that people who had the highest amount of affection had actually the lowest amount of anxiety. They had the best physical outcomes, and they had the best relationships. So it's not just that we give like the normal level of affection to our children. We know from this research and many other studies, this is just one, but other studies confirm this, that extravagant amount of nurture actually gives us the best powerful tools for the future, lifelong mental health and physical health.
So I'm assuming that this isn't specific to mothers and not specific necessarily to parents, but to everyone who cares for the child, every adult who's taking care of the child.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as a parent, you know, even if you return to work, your biggest goal should be to find the best caregiver for your child, someone who's nurturing, who understands this, what I'm sharing, you know, the neuroscience, who understands the attachment, basically the whole village. I'm calling it village. We don't really have village these days, but the whole support system should be on the same page and be informed about the powers of nurturing.
Which can be tricky because, you know, we have our parents and they had their beliefs that got handed down from their parents and they parented us our way. And like there is a dynamic sometimes. There are grandparents who like want to learn and do things a little different, and maybe they even experimented with that with their own children and the spacing and did things different on their third versus their first. But you also have parents who are like, this is how it's done, and like you turned out fine, and like all those dynamics. So I can imagine that can be tricky for some families to get their extended family on board.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, I would say we have the research on this too, but being nurturing is healing. It's healing on a brain level. And we have research that shows that parental brain changes for women already in pregnancy, but when the baby's here, it can change for everyone. And you know, when we have our babies and we are nurturing, we give them love, we give them the right attention, we're actually healing our wounds. We are healing what was not here for us. And you know, some parents actually didn't experience high nurture. Most of the parents actually don't have high nurture. It's usually a mix. But some parents experience lower nurture, maybe abuse even, you know, and they might be thinking, well, how am I going to do it? You know, like I didn't have the right example in my life. So those parents need to try extra hard and they need to resource themselves. They need to be surrounded by the right examples. But it is possible to parent differently and actually heal your brain.
Mhm.
I haven't talked about it, but the parental brain is open to repair when we become parents.
Mhm.
So the magic, the gold window for building foundation for mental health is from 0 to 3. But then the repair can happen in adolescence. That's from around 9 to 14. That's when the child body changes into adult body. But then another time of season is the parenthood. And we call it matrescence in scientific terms. And I believe we don't have research for that, but I believe it can happen for grandparents too. It can happen for
I was
other
just gonna
caregivers.
ask that
Yes.
because I could imagine that,
Yeah.
you know, you're a parent, you're stressed, and people are giving you
Yeah.
advice, you don't know what's right. And then you're finally out of the clouds. You've got these grandbabies. And I've heard it from grandparents before where it's like this fresh start and you're
Yes.
not sleep deprived, so you could like do it the way you would have wanted to do it in a way.
Totally. It gives me chills because,
Mhm.
you know, some parents, they might regret that they didn't do their best when their children. And when they say, oh, yeah, you just turned out fine, they might know deep down there they could have done better.
I mean, well, my kids aren't even like grown. They're 9,
Mhm.
8, and I had them kind of back to back, and it was like a whirlwind. And I for sure there was a laundry list of the things I'd never do that I did. And like I can already think of, man, how I would have wanted to do things a little bit differently, have a little bit more patience and all those things. So it's like a fresh start as a grandparent to like if you could open to
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. And, you know, I also want to remind parents, you are not supposed to be perfect. Perfect parents are not allowed, okay? We are supposed to get it right. There is a concept of good enough mother.
Mhm.
If we did it perfect, that wouldn't help the children to cope in the world. World
Yeah.
is not a perfect world.
I
So
always joke that the only perfect parent is someone who doesn't have children.
yes,
Because you always
absolutely.
do, like, you see how people are raising their children, and you either are like, I would love to do it that way, or I'm definitely not doing it that way. And you like have
Yep.
this vision of how it's going to be so different when you have children.
Absolutely, yeah. We have research to that. Parents,
Love this.
parents have actually a different brain than people who don't have children. And for now, we have this research for only parents. We don't have it for other caregivers.
Mm.
But these changes last for the whole life. So I will give you some examples because it's interesting. When you become a parent, your auditory cortex and your sensitivity to hearing, for example, crying gets more sensitive. So before children, you didn't react to it that much, but now as your parent, it can actually hurt you physically, or it can start, you know, lactation going when you hear crying. That's when that's the brain doing it. It changed in pregnancy for mothers already, and for, you know, fathers, it can be also like very uncomfortable, but that happens when the baby's here.
Mhm, mhm.
Then there is heightened empathy. So the part of the brain that is called insula is actually for parents. Parents are able to get behind someone's eyes way more than people who don't have children. You know, the empathy, because we, especially when we have toddlers, we really have to understand what's going on to be able to bring the child back to a safety state or calm state, you know. Also, we have a very interesting, this is amygdala, that's an emotional brain. Parents are able to detect threat way faster than people who don't have children. I know in myself, like I hear cars everywhere, or sometimes I imagine things that could happen.
Mhm.
And it's just my brain trying to protect my baby.
Mhm.
And there are so many superpowers that come out from this season.
Mhm.
And also often parents report, I have the mommy brain. You know, my brain is a goo. But this is a part of it. Your brain is actually changing, and it's a season, and you will not be the same like you were before. And I think a lot of parents don't know it, like you are not going to be the pet party animal like you were before. I mean, you could, but you will always think about your child. If you're listening to these instincts, because we know we can override this when people tell us, oh, don't listen to your child to cry, don't pick them up, because we can ignore our instincts, but we are wired to actually listen to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just that like fine line between, being prepared for what could happen and slipping into anxiety over it and like this point where it can become unhealthy, but I think it's great to normalize that it is a normal thing to do, is to think about the bad things that could happen. So you're almost like planning, like what would I do in that situation? So that I have a plan in place, but then being able to move on from it, like the healthy piece of it.
Yeah, I mean, we know that parents, after they have their babies, they are more likely to have anxiety, right? Depression, and it's also related.
And even rage. I think that's one we don't talk a lot about.
Yes,
Postpartum
absolutely.
rage.
Yeah, obsessions. But also we have to realize that's because the brain is changing. There is this opportunity to repair the brain, but it's also vulnerable, and that's the same for the babies, so you can grow it beautifully, or you can actually make some damage to it, because you're not nurturing. But I just want to say, all of these superpowers, in the brain that come out from the matricins and patricins, they basically want us to be close to our babies. They don't want us to separate. So the fact that the maternity leave in the United States is basically non-existent or very, very short, or that there are actually a lot of books out there and professionals that tell us to separate from our babies, that it's better for them, is harmful. It can be harmful for our parental mental health too.
Yeah, it's the idea that like puppies and kittens are required to stay with their babies longer than our leave is. Do you know what it's like in other parts of the world in terms of like leave?
Yes, absolutely. I'm from Europe, from Czech Republic, so let's start there. So Czech Republic has one of the longest leaves in the world. It's 3 to 4 years, and it's paid maternity leave, with mother's job secured or guaranteed after she returns. Also, mother and the baby have a health care. So the mother, as long as she takes care of the baby, is insured by the government insurance, which is really good, high quality. The child in Czech Republic is actually insured all the way until the age of 26. It's all for free. So in Czech Republic, for example, there are no preschools, there are no daycares. Preschools are from the age of 3 or 4 usually, but nothing before then. It's very rare. Also, that because there is a long maternity leave, it affects the breastfeeding rate. So the way higher breastfeeding rates in Czech Republic than United States. Also, mothers don't get breast pump from the insurance company in the Czech Republic. Women don't use breast pumps. Sleep training in the countries where the longer maternity leave is not used usually. In Czech Republic, it's actually viewed as unnecessary or harsh. And it's like, I would say, if some families try it, like there might be very, very few. You would get a lot of, I think your friends would be like, you're torturing your baby, like we cannot be friends with you, so very different. But I love to travel. So we visited Japan. That's 1 year maternity leave. Germany, it's the same thing. Sweden, 2 years, But I know that most of the world actually doesn't get maternity leave. It's the Western world. But the United States has the lowest. There's 0 basically on federal level, 0 months.
Do you know what it is for the partner?
Yeah, in Czech Republic or everywhere else?
Anywhere.
Yeah, well, I know that in Sweden, actually, it can be half-half, or either one is doing the whole thing. It can be mother or father. It's the same in Czech Republic, yes.
Oh.
There is no difference. But as if you're speaking of both that are on the maternity leave and of family leave, in Czech Republic, I think it's just 2 weeks. And for father or mother, and then the longer one gets the other parent.
Whoever's staying with the baby, yeah.
Yeah. Which, again, the research says that it's recommended for the partner, the secondary caregiver, to stay with the baby as long as possible, especially in the beginning, because that's when the parental brain is changing. So the parent is, again, as nurturing as possible. The parental sensitivity must be very high, the emotional attunement. And if you're not spending a lot of time with your child, because it's dose dependent, then you are not going to be as emotionally tuned. You're not going to understand your child that much. So it's really hard. The system is not working for the families here. And in most of the world, it's not. One of the parents always have to work at least one day.
It's amazing to see how like interconnected everything is. Like, not being able to have this extended maternity leave leading to lower rates of breastfeeding, leading to like, not sleeping in the same bed together, leading to disconnect, leading to, and then mental health all the way down to adulthood, and
Yes.
how you raise your child with that mental health.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we have studies that show that American parents are under a huge amount of stress and pressure. They are forced to go back to work, and it has impact on them, on the children too. For sure.
I can imagine how stressful that would be for you to like be here having your children and knowing what it could be like back at home.
Yeah, and I also could get paid for being mother,
Yeah.
And in Czech Republic, it's the most of the mothers know that for the first few years they're mothers. They don't have to do it all. And here it's mothers have to do it all, and they have to take on a lot of roles, whereas in Czech Republic they can just ease into the role and just be there present 100% for the child. And it's not the only thing here in the United States, especially California. Parents are alone, right? They don't have much support, and the family unit is broken here, and if it's working, it's fair. I'm Marin, and most of my friends don't have their family nearby, or the grandparents don't want to work. Sorry, they don't want to support the family, because they want to have their independent lives, and in Czech Republic that's unheard of. Like, grandmothers are allo parents. They're there to serve the family when there is a baby born. So, and I still see some families doing that here, but there it's way more because it's more traditional there. Family is on a big value there. So,
and the thing is, like, bringing that back starts with like having a beautiful relationship with your mother where you feel loved and nurtured so that and you want her, because that's a really common thing where families are like, I love my mom, but only like for a certain amount of time, like,
yes.
and like she's, got her opinions, and I'm trying to set boundaries, and they're still trying to heal their like mother wounds and things like that.
Absolutely.
And so if we didn't have to do that with our children, and the help was welcomed and wanted, and
yeah. And I feel like, we talked about it a few minutes ago, but if the grandparents want to help and they have different views on what should be done, I would have an honest conversation with them, what the research now is showing us these days. And a beautiful book is by the Greer Kirschenbaum, The Nurture Revolution. That's like you will learn everything about infant brain development, parental brain changes, and the practices that can support the nurturing relationship. And I would give that book to caregivers, to daycares. It's great, yeah, and it's simple. 200 pages. It's a little bit nerdy in the beginning, but I think it's great.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Perfect.
Can you speak a little bit to like biological sleep. And I know we touched on like bed sharing and things, but like what would be typical for parents to expect, and what would be things where I can imagine there are some disruptions where families can chalk it up to this is just part of what it's like to have a baby and be a parent, and then there could be things that are like actually not normal.
Oh, yeah, got it. Yeah. Well, babies don't sleep like babies. We already know that. I feel like American parents have really high expectations from the baby sleep. I had them too, and I'm European, but I would say I felt like I was raised without being around children and being around other families. So I had no idea what being a parent is like. So I'm not saying it's American families. It's just when you're in a certain culture that is telling you that baby should sleep through the night at a certain age, or baby should self-soothe, you're wondering, okay, what's wrong with my baby? So what is actually biologically normal? So babies or infant sleep, child sleep is very different than adult sleep. And that's at least until the age of 5. And at the age of 5, the child sleep basically is like adult sleep in the sleep architecture. Okay. Baby sleep is actually supposed to be fragmented. It's supposed to be co-regulated, and it's non-linear. So why is it fragmented? Well, first of all, babies need to feed a lot. Okay. They also need to know that a caregiver is close. They also, that's how humans are programmed. We are supposed to be close to them. We're supposed to be cared for all the time. Yeah, we cannot be just left alone somewhere for 12 hours.
It's like a survival piece, like, yeah, there aren't saber-toothed tigers, outside of our caves anymore, but like our babies don't know that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you were on a desert island, just you and your partner, and you had a baby, you would listen to these instincts because they would be, of course, for the survival reasons, but you would listen to the part of the brain that develops specifically to nurture your child. But sleep is not something that should be trained or taught. Sleep actually develops as the emotional system develops for the child, it takes time. And that's usually the self-regulation and being able to separate from the parents. Everything is in prefrontal cortex, and that doesn't start growing until the age of 3, and it takes time. Even a 7-year-old child might need their parents at night, but especially the little ones, I would say until the age of 2 or even 3, it can be still messy. They still might need you at night. And my goal as a sleep consultant and sleep educator is to make sure everyone gets as much sleep as possible. I always look at if there are any medical issues, which can cause, more frequent night wake-ins, and so many other issues. But I feel like this is a great opportunity to look if there is any problem with the health, because if everything gets better, or if people fix it sometimes with sleep training, right? You can actually overshadow the problem that is happening. There can be airway issues, there can be allergies, there can be, so many other things. And so actually paying attention to what's happening and looking at the signs that there could be something happening can give the child an opportunity, to deal with now and not as an adult. And you might not even see the signs as an adult, But yeah, like children actually, it's normal that they wake up at night. It's very hard for parents, and that's why we need to optimize it. I would say that children should sleep within arm's reach for as long as possible. They shouldn't. It depends on the family. Okay, I'm not saying don't have your child in a different room, but if the child wakes up at night, it's harder for the parent to tend the child than just having them within arm's reach. Yeah, I help with night wakings. I help with night weaning, but from the age of 2, not earlier. But literally recommends it the earliest at 18 months. And that's because the child can understand it cognitively. But I don't think so, really. I think it's later. I think it's 2 years old, if not even a little bit later. I also help with different transitions, like new way to fall asleep, new sleep location, or adding another baby. Also, there is a sleep emergency when parent really cannot keep going, and that's when I help to like figure out what are we gonna do now, think of a plan, because you can get to the point when you're extremely exhausted as a parent and you just cannot keep going. It's affecting your mental health, and we need to think out of the box.
Yeah. I had a friend who was actually like even affecting her heart, the lack of sleep. And she's like, if I hear one more mommy group suggest to me that I should put lavender oil in her bath, I'm going to scream,
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I haven't already tried it,
Yeah, totally.
Mhm.
And every family is different, and that's what I try to do. I offer an individual plan for every family. I'm not giving like a tailored advice for everyone, and I think that's a big difference between sleep training and actually talking about biologically normal sleep.
Mm-hmm. So you, in terms of your offers, you would start that around 2 years, but also if somebody was in crisis, you could work with them sooner to support
Yes.
them
Oh,
through.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I would suggest night weaning at 2 years earlier, because that's when it's the easiest, before then the children don't understand why you're taking milk from them.
Mm-hmm.
But and by the way, night weaning doesn't guarantee that the child is going to stop waking at night. They
Yeah.
can still wake up at night, and by stopping breastfeeding, you might take the easiest tool for them to fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
But if there is any issue, I help babies from the time they're born, and even help pregnant women to get an understanding of what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, yeah, babies from 0 months when they're born all the way until the age of 5, yeah. And it can be tough when there is a sleep regression or sleep progression, right? It can be really tough if the mom is not doing well. It can be mental health problems or physical problems.
Mm-hmm.
She might be wondering if she can continue bedsharing, if she's taking certain medication, and I can help with that. Yeah. It doesn't get hard only when it's later. It gets hard all the time. Like there are phases up, and there are many ups and downs, and especially when the babies are learning new skills like walking or talking, that can get really rough.
Yeah.
And we have a theory why it's happening. There was a study done on rats, when rats were learning new skills during the day, and then they looked at their sleep at night, and their REM was like firing. It's very active, so much active sleep, way more than usual. And that's what we think is happening for our babies. It's just like REM sleep is actually for learning, for memory retention, also for emotion processing. And so when you're learning new things or experiencing some emotions during the day, the sleep is going to be more disrupted.
That makes so much sense, because there's all these times where you have like a non-stop busy day with even toddler, your kid, and you're like, oh my God, they're going to sleep well tonight because they should be so exhausted. And then it's not the case. You're like, you skip naps, like they're going to be wiped out, and then they do not have an awesome night's sleep. And I also thought too, in my head, when my child was learning new skills and like crawling and, walking and all this stuff, I felt like I noticed that they would just have little sips of milk because they were too busy. There was like so much fun happening and going on. And so I felt like they were making up for it at night, where they're like, I just drank enough just to have enough, but I'm like too busy to nurse. But then at night, they're like, okay, now I'm going to nurse a bunch.
Absolutely, yeah. And nursing at night is about hunger, absolutely, about being thirsty, but it's also about connecting with the caregiver and the fact that their nervous system is not mature enough. They need to check on the caregiver. They might have gas, they might have other discomfort, stuffy nose. Oh, so many reasons for that. But you're totally right, yeah. It's the disruption in sleep is even happening in adults. Just imagine when you have really stressful day, or you learn so much during the day.
Your brain won't turn off.
Exactly. You're even dreaming about it. So you can see a lot of analogies between the infant and adult sleep too, you know?
Yeah. In your experience working with families, and you might not have an answer to this, is there something that comes up where you're like, oh, I see that so often disrupting sleep? And maybe it is like a health thing, like maybe it is like their tonsils or, you know, whatever it is where you're like, you know, if it is very abnormal and dysregulated and like this is a good thing to rule out or like go to chiropractor, cranial sacral, or like, are there things, modalities that you feel are very supportive and helpful across the board for sleep, or things that like you see over and over again, like tongue ties? Do those affect it? You know, like over and over, I'm seeing this like a really common thing that needs to get addressed.
Yeah. Since you're mentioning tongue ties, yeah, it can cause breathing issues, airway issues, open mouth breathing, and therefore more wake ups. And not just because the tonsils are you know, the tongue is actually blocking the airway, so the child needs to kind of, and this is a serious issue. Okay, I would refer in this case to a specialist, lactation consultant, and maybe there is something more going on. So to ENT, specialized in upper airway. But you mentioned that one thing that I would recommend to everyone if there is something going with sleep. I would say I would go back to the core, the basics of sleep. So I would try to optimize circadian rhythm and focus on light. And this can be applied on adults as well. So right upon waking up, you should, I would say within 15 minutes of waking up, just go to the natural light for 20 minutes. So we should do it with our babies. And I would suggest it to adults too, because after you do these practices with the light, you will have deeper sleep at night. You will sleep better. You should do the same thing during the midday, also like 20 minutes, because the spectrum of light is different depending on the time of the day. And you should do it before the sunset, you know, because the light is also changing. So you should, if you can, right when you wake up, go to daylight and basically like be in a natural light as much as possible. So I think I would start there. But if working with other, I don't have experience with that. Like if you work with a chiropractor, if sleep can help, but I think it can, you know, but I don't have personal experience with that and my clients either. Yeah. But I usually work with what we know about sleep science and sleep biology, and I would start with the light.
Good. Well, before we end, can you speak a little bit too about your offerings for families who might be interested in having support?
Absolutely, yeah. So I've had this vision for a really long time to create a community for newborn moms, and it manifested with my mentors, Greer and Rocio, neuroscientists, and they helped to create a space for moms where moms could learn everything about infant brain development, their own parental changes in brain. They could learn about other parenting topics, but it's all based on the infant brain development. And so I want to bring that to the community. I want to bring the knowledge. I want to bring the education. And not just that, I want to bring self-care practices for moms, because moms are usually doing it all in the beginning and they are overwhelmed. And very often, you know, they don't know how to connect with baby or they don't have time for it. And so having dedicated time to connect with the baby would be such a gift for the mom and the baby, because, you know, connecting to the baby helps the baby to grow resilient emotional system, and the same for the mom. So I want to provide self-care practices for the whole family, basically. Realistic ones, because, you know, a lot of moms were used to doing like 20-minute meditation, and even an hour meditation, but, you know, it's not possible these days. So I will bring like 3-minute meditations for the mom. They can do it throughout the day multiple times, or even just once, you know, to regulate their nervous system. And then I'm most excited about creating the community, you know, having other parents who get it, who are on the same page, like-minded parents. That's such an amazing gift in the beginning of parenthood, because, you know, you're surrounded people who understand you. And that's I hope we can get it from that. We will meet every week from June 12th until August 14th in Fairfax Women's Club, every Thursday morning. And we will also create an online WhatsApp group for these moms and for these families. And everyone who is interested can look at more information through Fairfax Recreation, or the website of Town of Fairfax, and register there as well.
Thanks everybody for listening. You can find us at Born Wild Podcast on Instagram. For inquiries or feedback, you can email us at bornwildpodcast@gmail.com. You can find me, Emma Ray, on Instagram at Emma Ray, REA.
Sophia at sophiabirth.com.
And me, Leah, at Bay Area Home Birth.
We would really appreciate it if you would rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps us reach more people. And as always,
Stay wild.